So we're now going to talk about and celebrate Sally's career as part of her Outstanding Contribution to European Sports Broadcasting Award. Take a seat. So this is an award which SVG Europe presents every year, and it's given to someone who has made a significant contribution to sports broadcasting in Europe. And it's very much a description that applies to Sally. Over her 40-year career, Sally's worked on some of the biggest and most high-profile sporting events. As we heard earlier, Sally was lead director for BBC Sports coverage of Paris 2024. A few weeks prior to that, she worked on her 25th Wimbledon as exec producer. And during her time with the BBC, she's worked on a host of other sports, both codes of rugby, the boat race, more summer and winter Olympics as well, and plenty of others besides. So Sally, we want to hear all about how you got into the industry, your route to the top, some of your challenges and some of your highlights as well. So to get us started, which I believe began 1985 in a newsroom in Leeds, tell us how you ended up there and how you progressed as well.
Yeah, I will. Thank you firstly for giving me this award. It's absolutely astonishing. I'm very honoured and very grateful. Thank you. I'm also slightly nonplussed, and actually to do all of that stuff and achieve all of that when you're only 26 is actually quite extraordinary. Anyway, I started in 1985 back at the BBC in Leeds. On one day I had 3 interviews. One was to go and sell property in Spain. The other was to go and do a BA in the Performing Arts at Manchester University, and the other was to join the BBC in Leeds as a facilities clerk. That's the one I took, obviously. And I haven't regretted a moment of it since. So I started as a facilities clerk, which meant processing invoices, typing up scripts for the regional news programme, Look North. And whilst I was there, I sort of formed an affinity with Harry Gration, the late Harry Gration, who's a name that some British people here might remember as the sort of presenter of Look North, but also had a keen interest in sport, which I did as well. So I very quickly sort of latched onto Harry and said, anything you need done in the sporting environment, please involve me, which he did very kindly. He then, at that time, used to do quite a bit of work with Grandstand, BBC Sports flagship sports programme that was every Saturday, and would become involved as a reporter in Olympics and things like that. So he then paved the way, really, for me, if you like, to apply for a job as a production assistant with BBC Sport in Manchester in 1991.
So tell us about the first events that you might have directed.
Oh, I'm glad you said might have.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember what the first one was. And I don't know if that's just because I have a poor memory, and that is probably likely to be the case, or whether because it was so horrendous that when you have terrible experiences, you just expunge it from your memory, so it never happened.
The first you remember then?
The first I remember, I think probably was a Grandstand, when I directed Grandstand, so a studio programme. And I remember going in and thinking, I actually can't quite believe that I'm doing this. Because when I first, back in 85, when I got the job at the BBC as a clerk, I remember going home and saying to my mum, I just want to get my name on the credits of Grandstand. That's all I want. Little knowing that 6 years later I would be working on Grandstand as a trainee assistant producer. And then I got my name on the credits of Grandstand, and that was the most incredible achievement. So when I then got to actually directing Grandstand, that was a real pinch me moment. Yeah, and I think it sort of went okay, but probably because I was bailed out by an awful lot of really good people who I was working with at the time, some of whom are actually here today.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned Harry Gration.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of your other role models or inspirations, people who kind of helped you to progress.
Yeah, so when I first started working at sport, at the sport department, I worked as a production assistant for the late Malcolm Kemp, who actually died 20 years ago this year. Malcolm was a Kiwi who came over to join the BBC in 1991, having worked for TV New Zealand as a sport director. And he came over to work in the sport department. I, as I said, worked as his PA. And Malcolm came with an attitude that was different. He had a lot of very different ideas. He was, so we're talking 33 years ago, he introduced split screens in coverage of horse racing, for example, which blew a lot of people's minds. It happened once and then it was closed down. He used to put music on replays in live action 33 years ago. I'm not saying he was the first person to do it. I think he was probably one of the first. So he was very forward-thinking. He also was never apologetic about wanting the best, demanding the best, politely most of the time, and expecting the best out of people, and instilling in them a pride in the job that they were doing. He was a very hard taskmaster. He made no apology for that. And some of that I applaud. I learnt a lot of what I do from Malcolm. I also, he would forgive me for saying this, learnt a lot of what I don't do from Malcolm, from my experiences with him. And then a second person who was a real mentor was Jo McCusker, who is on the front row sitting here today. Jo's a trailblazer. She's a very good, excellent, award-winning documentary maker. Again, makes no apology about the person that she is, and had to forge her way in Grandstand in those early days, in the early 90s, as a female in a very male-dominated environment. And Jo's a very generous person, sometimes to her own detriment. You know, she edited the BBC's golf coverage. She would say to somebody, come and sit in the chair and get some experience. She did that with all of the live output that she edited. Never afraid to be herself, always generous with people, always encouraging people, and being a great mentor to people, me included. So Jo would be the second person that I choose in answer to that.
And with those people who have influenced you and helped you and perhaps provided some mentorship as well, for yourself, what are you looking for in the events that you've exec produced and where you're directing? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve with those events?
Personally, you mean with the team or with,
when you set out, what's in your mind that you're trying to create for the viewer at home?
Well, the content itself and how it's covered is generally decided by the editors that we have on the events that we're working on. So it's my job then to actually bring that all together and to work with the tech team, to work with the crews, to work with the VT teams and the production management. And I just want everybody to walk away from that experience not feeling burnt, not feeling like they never want to do that again, and thinking that they've had the most horrendous experience, that they don't ever want to go back there. Because I've been there in some of those positions in my earlier career. So I try to take as much as I can from what I've done as I've had my journey through the BBC and bring that to bear with other people when I'm in a position to be able to influence what they do and influence what their experience is. The editorial will look after itself. How that story is told and what the experiences of the people who create that story is something that I can have an impact on, and I want to have a positive impact on it. So, you know, be authentic. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Don't pretend to know things that you don't. There are, you know, other people in this room that I've worked with. Tom, who was sitting here before, who I used to work with at Wimbledon. You know, I'm not a technical person. I got about 1% of what they were talking about. The rest of it was just, I have absolutely no idea. I've never, I hope, never pretended to know about stuff that I don't. Because you'll always get found out. And there's no shame in being vulnerable. We all have different skills in different areas, don't we? And we all have different teams, and we draw together the best people for those teams because they're the best people in their job. Don't micromanage them. Let them get on with it. Guide them, but then let them go.
And on the subject of your style, your approach, and Wimbledon as well, we do have a short clip of you in action this year's championships, isn't it, I believe?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
If we're able to see...
That's it, and he's done it. Her Majesty will present the trophy to a British winner. The emotions overcome him. Oh, that's brilliant! Oh, yes. That is perfect. Irresistible.
We are going on air on BBC One at about 12:30, and we've got the lovely Carol Kirkwood out on the Amex roof. I wonder if, I know you're a bit rainy at the moment, but if the shot were usable, would you be able to help us out with the travel to find Carol on the Amex roof? If you could be on standby from about 10:35, please, Wycombe, that would be great. It's due a couple of minutes after that.
Nice, Sally.
Listening.
Is the Beckett division the light well better now?
Camera 3, could you just offer me the light well again, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Could I have a look at the last 10 seconds of item 3, if you have it, please? I'm not hearing anything, Andy, is it?
No, not everyone.
I'm just going to check when Andy...
Trolley buses are powered by...
just a quick thought, Claire.
Yeah.
Your opening link.
Yes.
I'm going to start with you in vision, and then on camera 3, and then we are going to develop round to a VR graphic which has the quarterfinal lineup to get into the opener.
No, Sally.
But yes, could we cut camera 3, please? So, Carl, if you could just frame up for the opening link for Claire. Here we go, VTX, sound on tape, and run X.
Apologies, it's music out in graphics.
And he's done it.
Thank you, Claire.
Well, good day from Wimbledon. Here we are.
Lovely, thank you.
There's a real calmness, isn't there?
Outwardly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to be, don't
Yeah.
you, as a director? You need to be, because you're the conductor of the orchestra, and, you know, if the strings and the brass are looking at you furiously, you know, going mad with your baton, and then, you know, they know that things are not going well.
Yes. And how was it you described it to me before? Making sure that they're playing...
All the right notes in the right order.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And for Wimbledon, I mentioned before, so 25 years you've been working on that. And I guess that perhaps quite nicely sort of provides a sort of charting of your career, if you like, because you started, was it starting on that as a production coordinator or production assistant?
No, I wasn't. I was there as a trainee assistant producer. That was my first foray at Wimbledon, yeah.
So you must have seen, just talking about Wimbledon specifically, quite a lot of changes in the way that has been produced, who you've worked with over the years as well. Can you give us an idea of what some of those sort of most significant moments have been in the way that coverage has changed and evolved, whether it's the tools that we use or the way that we use those tools?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started, the BBC was host broadcaster as well as a domestic broadcaster for Wimbledon, so obviously that was a much bigger operation. And then WBS, Wimbledon Broadcast Services, took over the host operation, which meant that what we did declined, or reduced rather. Didn't decline, certainly not in standards. But it meant that we then focused, you know, completely on what our domestic output was going to be. So in my role then as exec producer, and having a wonderful relationship with Wimbledon, which we do, and with our resource providers, you know, we can forge ahead really well with our continued coverage of Wimbledon, exploit the grounds, exploit the area, bring, you know, as much as we can to the audience. It hasn't changed a great deal. I mean, we do talk a lot about innovation at Wimbledon. However, the truth is that you've got 2 channels, you're simultaneously broadcasting for a number of hours each day, and we have 1 truck. And certainly in the first week, it's tennis, 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 tennis. That's what the audience wants. So there's no point in tinkering with that, because all you'll do is actually annoy the audience who just want to watch tennis. So in terms of analysis tools or actually doing anything else with our coverage, there's very little scope there. And there's no point in doing something just for the sake of it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And more generally, when you look back at your career, what are the moments that you're most proud of?
Well, one would be the one that I'd already mentioned, which is my first Grandstand, which was amazing. Second moment would be London 2012. I was directing the breakfast programme, and that's because that contained the rowing in it, and I had produced the rowing for the BBC from 2001 through till up to the end of and including the Beijing Olympics. So with my knowledge of rowing, they said to me, well, you do the morning programme, which will include the rowing because that's what you know. So I said, yeah, okay, fine. Over that period of being the rowing producer, I had become very friendly with Catherine Granger, now Dame Catherine Granger, and we remain good friends to this day. So to see Catherine finally achieve her goal of winning gold and becoming the Olympic champion at London 2012 at a home Olympics, and me actually directing the coverage of that was such a special moment, really, and is a great illustration of what I think my career has brought to me in terms of making friendships, making relationships and maintaining those, you know, throughout the year, and just being in such a position of privilege. Really, a massive position of privilege with what I've done.
And we started today with Ken and Alessandro just talking about some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and about what's likely to take place in the future in live sports production and broadcasting. Can you just give us an idea of what your hopes for the industry going forwards are?
Cool. Yeah. I hope it misses me a little bit. That's one of my hopes. No, seriously, I hope. I mean, from a sporting perspective, I think there was an article that came out earlier this week or at the end of last week, which talked about the decline of linear TV viewers. Being at a rate of about 26% in the last 3 or 4 years. However, sport bucks that trend as a genre. Sport viewing, linear TV viewing, has only declined by 3%. There's also another report that's come out that says that actually from the 16 to 34-year-olds that actually their viewing is going up in sport as opposed to other genres, which really gives you hope, because I think we're all a little bit glass half empty at the moment, and whilst we might be riding high on the success of the Olympics, and weren't they wonderful, and the Euros and all the major sporting events that we've witnessed this year, and Wimbledon amongst them, that is a major sporting event too, in my opinion. I hope that it continues to maintain its profile and improve and increase slightly, and I think it will, because I think it's proven that sport is a genre that will still keep people's interest across the board. The other hope that I have, just finally, is that we start to see an improvement in diversity in the broadcast industry. You know, as I look out here at, you know, the sea of wonderful faces, there's not a great lot of diversity here, and I know that a lot of companies are investing in programs to increase their diversity. We need to start seeing the results of that now, because as a woman of the 90s coming through in a very male-dominated environment, I did have to work much harder than my male colleagues to get to where I've got to. I don't want that to happen anymore. I think it's improving, but it's got a long way to go. So that would be one of my main hopes for the future.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Sally, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and over the last few weeks as well. So thank you very much. I'd now like to invite SVG Europe Chair Alessandro Rotano to the stage to present you with your award. But first, we have some messages for you from some friends and colleagues.
Thank you. Sally, I'm very honored to present you the award for the Outstanding Contribution Award on behalf of SVG, the entire family, the entire sports family. everyone in this room, so well deserved. Thank you very much for all the contribution. And I know we never met before, but this is the first time that this is always good to start with such a pleasure. Thank you very much. Please join me in celebrating Sally. Thank you.
Oh gosh, I'm not sure if I can speak. I've done a lot of crying recently, having left the BBC and having had the most amazing farewells. I'll be very brief because I'm hoping that the bar is open. Great. Oh, I don't know about you, but I definitely need a drink. Thank you so much, firstly, to SVG for this award and honour. Well, I said earlier, George, it is an honour and a privilege, and this is an honour and a privilege to be recognised by your colleagues in the industry is really the ultimate accolade. And back in 1985, if somebody had said to me as I joined the BBC in Leeds and I was typing out scripts that actually I'd be standing here all of these years later, I'd have told them that they were absolutely bonkers. So it's a real privilege, it really is. Those video tributes are quite extraordinary, and I thank you for that as well, for gathering that. That's just been wonderful. There's a lot of people in this room who I have worked with in many different guises, and I could not have done that. God, I'm getting into a cliche here. I wouldn't be here without my mum and dad. Of course I wouldn't. But for all of the people who are in this room who I've worked with, I want to say thank you, because I really mean it. Without you, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be doing this, and I wouldn't have this lovely award in my hand. So I thank you, all of you who I've worked with over the years. Thank you so much. Thank you.